Hello everybody, welcome back to Spruverse, my scale model universe. People of Earth, welcome to part 2 of Build the Helios 1/650 scale Enterprise D. And I now have on the bench the lower portion of the saucer. I have completed all the windows, except I haven't installed the dome yet, for the top part of the saucer. And it took about 4 days, 8 hours a day, 867 windows. Take a look. Here it is in all of its glory over there. Okay, so a couple of things. One is all the windows are completed, including deck 1, which is referred to as deck 1, and all the windows in front. The lower portion, the smaller slits, are all done with a medium viscosity UV resin. And the larger windows here I did with my light curing putty from Frozen. And I have found another version of that which is on its way here. So as soon as it gets here, if I think it's of a quality, I'll let you know. But we're completed. So I'm very happy about that. I've also been test fitting, by the way, while I'm over here. There was an issue with this metal plate. The original kit came with a plate that was a lot thicker. And I believe it was actually Andy over at Canadian Starships that discovered that, reached out to Helios and said, yes, in fact, it's wrong. But what this plate is it's actually, it serves as a couple of things. First of all, it creates balance for this model, and also this 1-inch hole here, you can see you're going to be able to put your plate, you're going to be able to put your pipe through, your stand pipe through, and bolt it to the top here, and that's not going anywhere. And there's plenty of room in the front here to get your wires in. Now, since everything really from the bottom is just SMD tape, those wires just have to come up and into this slot here and then down, but everything else can sit up in here. Now the only other concern is that if you are going to put if you're going to put your board up here or any other wiring, you got to make sure that you're completely insulated, because I can see a short coming as sure as I'm standing here. But no, that's a result, and I'm super happy with that. Okay, so that's the top portion completed. I'm now going to start on the lower portion, and it's got its own challenges, interestingly enough. So a couple of things I want to point out to the lower. One is I've got a lot more gaps that I'm going to have to clean up, which is no problem. There's a huge one here, and they're in the windows, and they're quite pronounced. If I can get you closer, and we'll find one that is lacking in. Well, let me get you over here, and we'll see something close up that you can take a look at. There we go. Well, let me get my fat fingers out the way. You can see these gaps here are quite pronounced. Quite pronounced. I can get my blade all the way through here. So there's an awful lot to do, but that's okay. Not concerned about it, because it'll all come together. However, interestingly enough, I've got some windows here that are huge. These windows here, they're huge. You could create a little room in there, I suppose, if you were going to. I'm not. The only place I may open up, as you know, is the large shuttle bay on top. But these windows, don't know about puttying these windows. Might have to find another way to glaze these. Now, I do have in my possession, I do have some slides, some slides, and they're for microscopes. and they would actually fit in here quite well. They'd sit in here, and I have the ability to cut them and drop them into place. Now I would have to diffuse them, but that's okay. The point is that I think I could do a lot better trying to glaze these with some kind of a microscopic slide that I diffuse. Or the other thing you could do is you could just put some clear sheet styrene in there, and that would work. You could even just pre-diffuse them, and have them sort of a milky. I've got some diffused sheet styrene as well, and you could do that as well if you don't want them to be open. But nevertheless, there is quite a few of them. I'm counting six of those that have to be dealt with. Otherwise, everything else just needs to be, all these windows just need to be put in. And this is going to go pretty fast. I can do these pretty fast now. And we've talked about this. But I'm just using a medium viscosity light curing resin. Now there's all kinds of brands. I showed you, I've been showing you a couple of them. I showed you in several of them. But what I've discovered is a medium viscosity, as long as you are, you have it in some kind of a needle, a pin nose that you can get it into here. Because it's medium viscosity, it's not going to slide right through. It'll sit there for a little bit, and then you can just go around and you can just quickly zap it with your UV light. Now, one of the things I've noticed is I've been leaving my lights on, and they get pretty hot when you do that. But clicking it off and on and off and on, it's not conducive to being speedy, as they say. So what I did was I invested in this little frozen UV light curing beam setup. Here it is. I'll show you it. Let me turn it around so you can read it. So it has two channels. One channel for a lesser power, and the second channel for a higher power. You can have it on permanently, just off and on, by hitting the channel number, or you can set the timer and have it on for a minute or for 10 minutes if you want an exact cure. And what I like about this is it's got this lovely little directional handle, and it is easy to use, and it gives you some pretty decent coverage. So I've been playing with that with some success. Okay, so great to have you back for part 2. Pretty excited. Once I get all the windows in the saucer, I'm going to move on, obviously, to the secondary hull. And once I get all the windows in, we are ready for masking. So I've got to I've got to wait, obviously, until I can get with Lou and he can bring me my masks, because without Lou's masks, you're dead in the water. You really are. Now, you could use tape. The 1/64 tape is actually probably the perfect width for these. Some of them are about 1.5 mil, some are 1 mil. And that tape is certainly, I have it, and you could just go around and you could just keep trimming it and you would be fine. But I just don't think that it is as clean. It won't get you as crisp of a result as you will get with Aztec dummy masks. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to get all of this puttied in, cleaned in, and then when we come back, I'll do a little more window work with you. And we'll also take a look at these larger windows and see whether or not we're actually going to use these microscope slides that I'm bragging about, or whether we're going to do something else. But we'll definitely make a decision in the next segment. I got all my sort of cracks and crevices taken care of, no issues. I started to look at these windows, the larger windows, and I did look at my microscope slides. Here's one here. The difficulty or the problem is they're optically clear. Now, if you're going to go ahead and use slides in a a 1-350 refit for your Arboretum, you're solid gold. But for something like this, where we don't really need to see in these windows, there's nothing to see, the optical clear doesn't make a lot of sense for me. So I opted for my putty, and it went in beautifully. Here it is. And that window is sorted. And if I stick my famous light behind it, it's perfect. It's nice and diffused, it's nice and soft, and it works. So all I need to do now is I come over it with some 600, and I just clean up the area, and it just takes out all of the rough edges and cleans it up. And at the end, after I've done this, I make sure that it's nice and smooth, and then after I've done that, I come through with a little tack rag, get that all cleaned up, and then you can hit that again with some 1000. I'm using sponges because the grit on them is a little more forgiving on this kind of application. So I would highly recommend sponges. You don't have to use the Tamiya sponges, but I like the Tamiya sponges. But this also is getting those windows nice and smooth, so that you get a really nice look to them. And there you are, smooth and in and done. And all I did at the back was I just used a little bit of tape, which you can either leave in if you wanted to, or you can remove it as I'm doing right here, and there you go. Now you could certainly, if you wanted to, and I'll show you, if you wanted to come at the back here and just kind of just fill this in with a little bit of your medium viscosity, if you wanted to, you can certainly do that, and then just hit that with your light like this, and just leave. I leave it for a little bit, just a little bit, just to let it go off nicely, and that's working like a charm. And so that's what it looks like. This is what it looks like in the back. Let me get you closer. There, that's what it looks like in the back. And this is what it looks like in the front. There you go. And if I shine my light behind it, as you can see, we get a really nice result. So I have got my work cut out for me now, because I'm back in the window business for the saucer. But once this is done, that's an awful lot of prep work done on this. Now, both sides of this saucer are going to need some really good sanding, because I'm going to have a little bit of residual from the UV resin. I don't want to be arrogant enough to suggest that you get a perfectly smooth surface, but before I hit this with a primer, I definitely want to just go over it with a couple of grits. I'll do 800, I'll do 1000, and then I'll do 2,000 and 3,000 with my sponges. I've got nice large sponges. I can get a lot of coverage, and I can really make this smooth again. And this will look absolutely perfect. I'll do it for both sides. I'm going to do it for the whole ship, in fact, because that'll just make my life a lot easier when I go to prime and paint this. And you want to try and get this finish as best as you can, because it's an awful lot of surface. You're looking at an awful lot of saucer here, so you want to make sure you get that done. Okay, so there you go. Windows continues. I know it's a little window laborious, but I think it's fun to see how I'm sort of tackling the window part of it. And Lou, if you're watching this, we got lots of little squares and shapes that we need for the place. I'm begging you. Masks! Okay, we'll continue. Okay, I think ultimately my preferred method of windows is definitely the light curing putty. Now, I've had great success with the UV activated resin. And there's a company I think I mentioned called, well, here they are. You can take a look for yourself. Here's the company out of New York, www.ny3dcreations.com. And they sell these wonderful little bottles with these pin applicators, and it's good. What I'm preferring about the putty is just simply my control of how much I can get off without having to sand down. Don't get me wrong, it all works. You can use either one and you can sand it down. Start with something like I'm using a 220 sponge, but fine, not a rough to start with. And then I've got a 600, 1000, and a 2000, and it's working quite well on this resin. Now, I'm going to be saying this a couple of times because I think it's really important. I have in the shop 2 HEPA filter air conditioners that are taking dust out of the air on as we speak. I'm blowing most of the heavy dust from sanding outside, or I do use a respirator. Once or twice on camera, you may have seen me without a respirator and using a light, just a light sanding or something. But I assure you that dust is going into a HEPA filter. And anyway, so what I've got on the bench here is I've got the final piece, the last of it all. So I thought just to go over windows again, I've got a couple of blades here. I've got a 17 and an 18 chisel blade, and they work really well. And I start from this end. Now, curiously, we've got some windows at the top here that, interestingly enough, are under the support block, so they're not windows, but they all have to be filled in. So we'll start there. We'll start at the top. And I push the putty into the windows, and I just keep going like this. And you can, if you get bold, you can do a whole section or the whole thing, and then you can wipe it down, and I'll show you how I do that. But get it in well, and I'll show you what that means up close. So here I am, and this is a good example of you take your putty and you continue to push it in the cracks like this. Get it in really well, and that forms your window. And then once I know it's in well, I take a paper towel, clean off my blade, and I scrape down, because you want to make sure that you get as much of that off as possible. Now, as not to waste it, I just drop down. If I've got a little over, I just drop down and I do the next section below, just so that I don't waste it. And then if I can't get it off my blade, I just simply take it off like this, and then I push it back into those holes like that. And away you go. Now, interestingly enough, somebody had asked me, could you add a dye to this and use black these windows out? Now, what I discovered was if you use, like for instance, I've been using the flat black from Citadel. You could spray a little bit of that on a plastic card, and then put your resin on it. And what the resin will do is it'll pick up the black and it'll turn it into a paste. And that works pretty well. Now what I'm doing now is I'm just taking off all of the residual like that, so that there's nothing on here and it's only in the windows. and then I take my lights, and on they go. And I just do a piece at a time, and you watch it. And as you watch it, what you'll see is, you can see it with this one here. It will start to cloud over. And as it clouds over, that's drying. And it only takes about 4 or 5 seconds for it to actually dry. Now the secret is in the sanding, because once you are finished with this application, and you go to your 220 fine, and then your 600, and then your 1000 and 2000, that polishes your windows. That gives you that nice finish. Now, there is, for those purists who are not, you know, and that's done, by the way. Those are rock solid in their end. And if you stick a light behind it, which I constantly am doing, you'll see. Well, let me go to the overhead here because I'm fighting it and I shouldn't be. There. They're in and they're absolutely perfect. Okay. So what I wanted to say was that there is a sort of a crystallization that happens to this putty. And it's very different than these diamond clear resins, you know, that you can also use. It is going to cloud over, and the sanding down gives it a really nice smooth finish. But the diffusion factor, I think, is perfect. If you go with anything clearer, the amount of diffusion you're still going to have to do in order to make it look real, I think, is sizable. This way, it's all done for you. And then, obviously, these windows have to be masked, and then they have to be primed. And if you're pre-primed on the inside, as I am here, you're going to be fine. Now, because I am using epoxy resin, I'll tack it with CA and then use epoxy resin to fill this in. It's going to be rock solid. It's not going anywhere. And so I don't have to worry about, painted surfaces, because this very light, just a very light sanding, and that comes off. But the Citadel does a fantastic job. The matte black, does a fantastic job of just laying down on this resin, and a couple of coats of your duper color primer on the outside, sanded down, and then your base coat on top of this, and then your final coats. This is light block, guys. There's not going to be any issues. Okay. So that is Windows continued. I've just got this little piece to do, and then I'm done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue getting my windows done, and then, believe it or not, we're going to talk about some lighting, because there are some. I'll pull out a schematic too. There's some holes that have to be drilled, so we'll have to pull out our lighting kit and look at our LEDs and just take a look at what holes need to be drilled. I know I have to do a hole for the photon torpedo in the front. I know I've got holes to drill for my flashing and also for my static navigation lights and beacons. And they all have to be drilled out. So we'll talk about that next. We'll look at that and we'll talk about it, because there's going to be a lot of prep work that has to be done, especially if I'm going to attempt to take these SMD addressable wafers, break them up and daisy chain them and test them and see if that works. Lots to do, but definitely, definitely worth it. So anyway, that is where we are, and that is what we're doing. So, okay. I have, behind the scenes, been making some progress. I pulled the board out, and I've been playing with it. I had a very interesting situation here, because in classic fashion, I am, as I sit here talking to you today, I am a novice
when it comes to a lighting. I've installed quite a bit of it now over the last few years, so I'm pretty comfortable with lighting processes and amperage and voltage and loads and how circuitry works. But boards can be a little finicky, and when I pulled out my board to test it, I thought I was powering it up, and the board was not functioning. It was not functioning because of me, human error, if you can believe this. And the thing is, it's actually quite interesting, and I'll show you. I have been using these connection tails for quite some time, and I love them. And I love them because of this cap that can keep dust out and keep them clean, and they're really well made. But what I had to remember was that red is ground, and the black-red line is your hot line here. Now, I'm always used to red being hot and black being ground, so I was confused. I had these reversed, and of course, it didn't work. But I went through my troubleshooting process and got that to work, and I'm here to report that the board is working beautifully. The sound system is amazing. The startup system is incredible. There'll be 8 soft touch buttons here. Here's one of them all sort of loaded up. And the idea is they're going to sit under your L-car, and you can just touch the top of the L-car and it will trigger these buttons, and they're very touch sensitive and they're working very well. I don't want to demonstrate to you right now because I don't want to ruin it. It's too cool. So that'll be something we'll have to wait for. But trust me when I tell you, the functionality is beautiful. It's a really well-made board. The question is where does this board go? Does it go in the base? Does it go in the saucer of the ship? If it goes in the saucer of the ship, it's too far away, and these leads would have to be extended, and I'm not entirely sure I want to do that. So I'm thinking that my board will live in my base. That's what I'm thinking, and all my wires will come down my pole into my base, and that's where everything will live. Sort of you're standard up. The question is, what does that base look like, and how is it going to hold this behemoth up? I don't know. But there's going to be a lot of debate and discussion about that. And I am happy to report as well that I am in discussion with Daniel over at Helios. He is a good man. He's a good man. He's a model maker. He's a passionate model maker. And he's just a delight to talk to. And the Helios team, I am now learning, are just decent people. They're really quality people. So I'm very, very happy for that. And you know, they want to know. They want to know if something isn't functioning properly, or can they improve on it? How do they improve on it? And he's aware of the fact that I felt that some of the there could have been a little more direction and a little more sort of thought that went into the lighting kit. So the next thing I want to talk about is light placement, because I'm going to have to drill some holes in this ship now. Now I know my board is functioning correctly. Everything is good to go. I can put this aside now, feeling absolutely relieved that I can start wiring up my ship, and that there's a lot of work to be done there. You know, we've been through the lighting kit, so you know what has to happen. There's a lot of LEDs and there's a lot of SMDs. Now, I have also ordered some SMD, addressable SMD tape. I've ordered it. I just want to test it. I want to plug it into the board and see how it behaves, and see if I can get it to behave. I have a feeling that I will be able to get it to behave, and that will be interesting, because then it will beg a question about how we go about lighting this, and I'm going to talk about that in the next segment. So let me set this aside. I want to pull up a schematic that we're going to use, because we know based on we know based on this schematic, and also a schematic of the actual ship itself, where the flashing lights are. We know there's one in the dome in the top of the ship. We know there's 2 on the nacelles in the rear. We know that the nav lights are statics. They are not flashers. So there's certain things we already know. And so between this schematic that came with the lighting kit and my other reference material, we should be in great shape. And then we'll pull out those LEDs and we'll take a look at what hole sizes need to be drilled. Okay, we're going to dive into lighting now. And I've been really studying the schematic just to sort of understand some things, and then there's some decisions that have to be made, and some of them are creative, and some of them are just, I don't know. They're decisions you have to make in terms of what's blinking on this ship. Now, when you look at the old Next Generation, you don't see any of the blinking navigation lights at all on the nacelles. In Picard, you do see them. You see one on the bridge. Actually, it's just behind the dome, and you do see them in a couple of the shots. You do see them on the nacelles, but they're not white. They're green. But what we've been given is white, and we're going to go with white. Only because I think green is very confusing. Now the navigation lights on this, your port and starboard, your reds and your green, they're static. And there's a static white navigation light on the front of the saucer. Everything else appears to be static. Nothing else appears to be blinking. So I've decided to go with 3. I'm going to go with 2 on the rear of the nacelles, and I'm going to go with 1 on the bridge. And what I have to be careful of, obviously, is scale and size, because that if it looks out of scale, it'll just be too bright and too obnoxious. It won't look real. And so I've done some preliminary light blocking on these nacelles now, because I want to show you where they're going to go on the rear of these nacelles, and then we'll sort of go from there. What you realize is, well, there's obviously your chiller grill, your warp drive action that's going to create some separation here for you, and then the other thing that you realize is that there is a certain level of fragileness to this, especially here in this section where your Bassard collector is going to go. That's obviously going to be sealed, and we're going to have to clean up that seam because I don't think there is any applique to go over that. There might be something, but I don't believe so. I think that's supposed to be smooth. So there's that has to be dealt with. I'm going to have to put some steel pins in here to connect my pylon with my nacelle, and then there is an applique that comes with this shut. Now what this is there's an indent here, and then you get this piece that drops in here, this grill. Now in the fantasy world, this would be amazing if this grill under here was photo etch, because I think it would just be a lot more dramatic. But this will be fine, and it's got enough detail that you can see that it's going to work out fine. And if I show you a shot of a production model, you can see here that the light itself actually sits in that little gap at the back there, and curiously enough, there's some decals around it too. The only other thing I can do, and perhaps I should probably do it, is pull out some of my my chips from Evans Design that are pre-resisted, and see whether or not I can get that to behave correctly on the board before I go any further. I'm going to get some light blocking done on these anyway, because that has to be done, and then I'll probably pull out the board again and just see whether or not I can get those Evans Design chips to behave. If I can, I'd much rather put those in here with just a little dab of my Solares on top of them. Now, the disadvantage is, at least with these, you get this lovely dome effect right out of the gate. With the SMDs, you're going to get just a dirty square and you're going to see it. So I have to think about this. But I'm at a point now where I need to think about it. So I will let you know how I'm going to proceed once I test the Evans chip, which I'm going to do. Okay, so all the other lights are static. And I'm going to be drilling top and bottom of the saucers for my red and green. I've got a white in front, and I've got obviously another flasher up on the bridge, assuming I'm going to be doing that. And there are a couple of static lights, a red and a green, that do appear in the back of the pylon section. Sort of directly under the neck and all the way to the back. So that has to be done too. The phaser array lights are already pre-drilled in. So this is the part where it starts to become quite, it's quite a thing to get all the lighting in here. But once I get light blocked and we make some basic decisions, it should go pretty fast, because a lot of the lighting is in fact it's strips, so they'll go in pretty good. The thing is what's interesting is, because all of your various different lights are connected to various different effects on your board, only where you've got, like for instance, your static reds, greens, and whites, well, that can all go into, technically it can all go into one line. Everything is going to be pre-resisted. It can all go into one line, and then that can plug into the board, and that shouldn't be a problem. However, what you do have to be concerned about is making sure that when you do things like that, thinking ahead, that are you going to interrupt an effect? Do you want that light to come on with other lights? Do you want it to come on individually? So all that has to be planned ahead. So I'm going to be being pretty fastidious here about how I organize myself and make some very detailed notes about how I'm lighting this and where my wires are running, so that as I label everything, I'm not going to make a mistake, some of the mistakes I've made in the past, which is when it's sloppier, it makes it a lot more difficult for you to figure out where everything goes on the board and is it going into the correct place. And under no circumstances am I going to try to deviate from the schematic. I'm just not going to do it. I don't have any luck doing that, and I don't. I just don't want to blow anything, and I don't want to short anything out. Okay, so I'm going to get some slick tulip under these ridges here and let that dry, and then I'm going to pull the board out, and I'm going to test that, and we'll take a look at that on camera. I'll show you what that flash looks like. Okay, as promised, we're doing a flash test. Now what I've done is I have wired up with a resistor a cool white 3mm LED that came with the kit. And I've also hooked up a warm white Pico chip from Evans Design, so that we can take a look and see what we think. Now they're both reacting as they should on the board. So let me go ahead and show you. This is the cool white doing its thing. Here is the warm white chip doing its thing. And I'll do one on its own. And then the other. 3mm LED Pico chip. Now I am preferring the warm yellow to the cool white, only because it's not as obnoxious. Now you could also say, well, maybe we'll do the warm yellows on the nacelles, and we could do the cool white on top, so you get a bit of variation. But then maybe it's just too much, I don't know. What I do know is that when you go back and you look at this piece, and you realize that I have got to drill through here, it makes a lot more sense to be able to lay in this one than it does this one. Now they'll both work, and you know what you could do is I can drill this out no problem, put a little bit of my light curing resin in there, and it would make a very nice lens, and this would sit no problem. The other issue, which is an interesting issue, which is the surface mounted SMDs are going to be a lot easier to install underneath this piece. I'll just drill a hole into the nacelle, drop this in, clean out this piece, and then this sits. Now the only other thing I might do before I make a final decision is I might see if I pull out some cool whites and see if I've got these in cool white to see if that makes a difference. So why don't we take a look at that? Well, I'm liking this very much, and it's nano, it's not pico, but I'm liking it an awful lot. So let's take a look at this. I've got them all flashing now. So you've got your 3mm, you've got your nano and your pico. 2 in the cold white and 1 in the warm. Now this is getting drowned out. Let me bring this up and you can see that's yellow and this is blue. It's a little bigger, but I think you'll agree. Let me just pull this out of the frame completely so this is going solo. I think this is the way to go. And what makes sense to me now is I can surface mount this. I can drill out this piece. I can surface mount it under here, and that should look pretty cool. Okay, and here is the finished effect. So obviously we're not flashing at the moment, and we've got a little bit of a light leak because this isn't attached, but I think you can get the general idea here, and that is a really nice that is a nice I think that's a nice effect. And I think contrasting that with this, I think you can see that I think we've done pretty well, all things considered. That's pretty good, and I think it is it's going to be proportionately correct in terms of scale. And because it's interesting, you know, even the old grain of wheat bulbs, which I haven't seen in a long time, which are obviously a lot smaller than this. Now there is a step down that we probably could have used, but I just think this is a cleaner, smoother way to go, and it's a lot easier for me to mount a surface mounted SMD than it is an LED. Okay, so I'm proud of that, very happy with that. That is a success. I've got both completed, and that is all of the well, that's the exterior lighting for the top of this. So we can start working on the chiller grills, or the warp drive, I suppose, which is interestingly enough in Picard. It's all blue, but in early editions it's copper and black. I like the all blue. I think it's a very clean way to go. Although certainly something I think I'll probably think about for a little bit. But that's a really good job done. And as I mentioned, I think I'm going to go with the 3mm LED on the saucer. The saucer's big enough; it can handle the scale of that. So I'm really happy with that, and I think that that is a good result. Okay, so we've looked at most of the lighting, and again, all of the strip lighting now, it's SMD strips, and it's going to go into the neck, it's going into the saucer, obviously, and we've got our blue SMD strip lighting for our warp drive effect. The next thing we're going to have to tackle is figuring out how we're actually going to get our nacelle effect, our Bassard collector effect, handled, because we've got to get some red LEDs to sit inside the clear piece, and you're not provided anything to do that with. So we're going to have to cut some sheet styrene and get those where we want them. And I'm going to try a little bit of fiberfill, I think, inside that clear effect. Now, interestingly enough, on some of the older pictures, it's an interesting look at this, because what you'll notice is that it's just a dusting of the red. It's just a dusting of it. And for the most part, it's relatively clear, but and slightly heavier on the outside. A side view of that, and you can see the grills here are in the copper and black, but it's gotten a little. Now I don't know if that discoloration is just from age, or whether that discoloration is deliberate. But it's interesting to look at that. So there's some things that we're going to have to consider in terms of what that looks like. And again, you know, the nice thing about all of these projects is they can be done out of order. There's no assembly issues here. It's just prepping these things, because until this is closed up, there won't be any issues. But I can promise you, before these nacelles are closed up for final paint, there's some other issues we're going to have to deal with, like how we're going to pin these. What's the procedure? There's no locator pins. There's nothing to marry this to the pylon support system. So we're going to have to figure that out. Epoxy some pins in and drop them in. But we're also going to have to figure out how we're channeling all of the wires, because again, not to sound like a broken record, but every single one of those wires, and I've got 2 for the blue SMD strips. There'll be 2 for, maybe even 4, so that'll be 6 for the Bassard collector effect. There's another 2 there for obviously the strobe at the rear, the flashing strobe that we just navigation light that we just put in. So there's 8 sets of wires. Now they're not super thick, and I do have a channel in the pylon superstructure, which we'll look at in I think it's worth looking at in just a second, so that we can get an idea of what's got to come down the pike here. But I'm glad to get this bit done. All right, I think we're gonna slide over to just taking a look at that pylon one more time and some of the challenges with wiring the nacelles, because I do think getting these nacelles wired up is probably the next thing that I will explore. And most likely that will be in the part 3 update. I know I said that we would probably have Lou here in the part 2 update, but as I'm recording this, it is we're in August 7th, so we've got a little ways to go. He's arriving here on the 20th, 21st. When we'll get in the studio to record, I don't know. So I've got another full week. So I think it's worth me doing this and then giving you an update on where I am with the rest of the lighting, because there's just a lot to do. But I think it's fun to get in the weeds and look at some of these things. Okay. As promised, we're gonna close this update with a little look at the pylons and the nacelles itself. Now I don't have my warp grill or chiller grill clear part in here, but you'll get the general idea. I don't even need to. So this is the top and the rear, and this is the back and the rear. And so, do you know what's funny? I don't know why this just popped into my head, but tell me this doesn't look like the Red October. Remember the film? It does. It looks like one of the old Russian submarines. Okay. Anyway, this is basically what we're looking at, something like that, right? I'm thinking about quite seriously, because what you realize is that there is absolutely only one of the only one of the holes, and guess what? It absolutely doesn't line up with your hole, which is not the end of the world, because I can drill that larger, but that's the hole that we're going to use. And so everything else becomes an opportunity, I suppose, for us to pin. So what we'll do is we'll get these pylons, we'll drop these pylons down on the top of the bottom of the nacelles, I should say, like that. Get them all lined up, and we'll epoxy those in, and we'll know at that point that those are absolutely square. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to create a little bit of a jig. So that's one of the issues that I'm going to be working on. But that will allow this to sit on here absolutely square once I get this lined up. And I should be able to line it up correctly once I get some locator pins in there. And I can do one side, and then I can just let the weight of it drop down and do the other side. So we'll set up one side, we'll tack one side up, get it all set up with its pins. And then we'll go to the other side, and that's how we'll do that, and that's how we're going to tackle that. There's no detail on the back here, and I believe that there should be. I think there are some lights here, although I don't know. There might be a piece of detail that we're going to be able to put in there. But there you go. That is the pylon and the nacelle, and how we're going to connect those. And then, of course, the other issue is a lighting issue, because our chiller grills. So we're going to just figure out where we're going to put our strip lights. And most likely get some reflective tape in there just to get some real hard bounce. And that will take care of that. And then I'm going to cut out from some card, maybe some 2 or 3 mil card, some ovals here that will sit inside the Bassard collector clear part that connects to its outer shell. And that will allow me to align up my 3 mil red LEDs. And I'm working on those now. I've started making those, and I'm going to test this first and see whether or not this is actually going to work for me. But that's what I'm doing, and we should be in good shape. And there's 2 of these for each side. So, and I believe they're just on and off. There's no pulsing. There's no effect to this. But if we put some fiber fill inside the clear part, after we've given it a little coat of the Tamiya Clear Red, we probably should get a pretty decent effect out of that. So you've got your red Bassard, your blue chiller / warp grills, and your white flashing nav or beacon locator on the rear of this. And that makes up your nacelles. And as I'm running this wire, and I'm using 28 gauge wrapping wire, it's nice and thin, and I should definitely be able to get 8 pairs in these no problem. I'll show you what that looks like when you wrap them down, wrap them in here like this. let's see here. Yeah. You can see it goes into the chase channel very, very nicely. So that's not going to be an issue, and then we'll cover this with some epoxy putty and get that nice and smooth, sand that down, and that'll be gone, and that'll take care of that. And I did have a conversation with Daniel today over at Helios Models. What an awesome human being. So just a really decent guy. It was great fun, but unfortunately it wasn't a Zoom call because I think he's a little shy. He didn't want me to record it, I don't think. But anyway, he called me, and we spoke for over an hour. And boy, am I glad I had a conversation with him. I've learned an awful lot about the history of this model, and why we have what we have and how we have what we have. And just sort of basic overview was fascinating. I mean, the impetus for doing this 1/650 came out of him building his 6 foot and getting an awful lot of demand for a kit. And so he set about trying to sort of figure it out. And the first rounders, and we're considered the first rounders. If you bought this kit in the first round last year, and then it was delivered. I think it was delivered this year, obviously, but we placed the orders last year. Then you got round one, and round one, he, as he tells me, was a noble effort. Let's just leave it at that. But and he refined some things in two, and if he does it again, he's going to refine even more. But great to speak to him and learn an awful lot, and and it's fascinating too. For example, windows. He has no windows. He didn't close these up. What he did was he used the decal sheets to lay over the open windows, and they became the diffused windows. Okay, lots more to share with you about that conversation as we go through the build, because it is fascinating. I was able to get my my locator hole in here for my beacon light. Now I'm going to be using a flasher, and everything else on here is static. There are no other flashing lights on here. And curiously enough, he tells me that this particular model, with all the details that he gave us, is based on the Generations model. It's not based on the Next Generation, and it's not based on Picard. It's based on the film. So if you want to kind of get this model as close as you can to its filming miniature, then you would want to be looking at the Generations model for this particular build. And I've been referencing that anyway, but catch as catch can. These are our models. We'll do what we want with them, right? So I am definitely going to get a flasher on here just to give this a little bit of energy. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to start working on is this laser, is getting these lights in for the phaser effect. And what I have is I have addressable SMDs, and I've got a ton of them. Here they are, and they're on a wafer. And the idea here is that you're going to and I'm looking here because I've got two versions. Sorry, I went quiet for a second because I bought these recently in the black, and I had these on hand, and these are in the white. I don't think it matters much, but I'm going to go with these white ones. And you can see you just snap them off, and they're addressable SMDs, right? So what you do is you sort of pick an end that you're going to sort of start with, and what we're going to do, and the reason why I'm doing this on camera just now is because this is going to be a boatload of work, a boatload. And I have no idea how long this is going to take me to get this done. But here's a few just to start with, right? Here they are. There are my addressable SMDs. Now I have these in the white. They came with the kit. And then I've also got them in the black here. the same thing. So we're going to start with we're going to start with these. Now, what you have to do, obviously, is you have to start on one end. You have to start on one end. I'm going to pick an end, and you have to go in one direction, and you have to follow the arrows. There's an arrow on here, on these addressable SMDs. Now, I know there's a lot of you out there who are going, wow, a tutorial from a guy who doesn't know his you-know-what from an SMD. And you would be correct. I do not claim to be a professional here, but I'm learning. We're all learning together, and there's going to be people in this group that are going to be at one end of the spectrum, and they're going to be those who are at the other end. The ones at the other end, I'm sure you'll want to fast forward through this tragic discussion here. But it's important for me to memorialize it, and also as I'm talking through it, it's helping me to sort of figure out what we're doing. Anyway, that's my disclaimer. Now let's take a look at the addressable SMD. Here it is, and you'll notice it has an arrow. So everything has to follow the arrow. It's fighting with me. There we go. Everything has to follow the arrow, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to pick an end, and I'm going to start on this end. So I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to start here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hot glue in all of my SMDs all the way around. All the way around. Until I get to the 70, I think it's the 72nd, it could be the 78th position, I don't recall. What is important is I thought I was being clever, and Daniel actually clued me in. And I said, well, I'm just going to go out and get myself a strip of these, and I don't have to sit here and do all of this work. He said, well, you certainly can. He said, but I'm going to have to send you some new code, because this is coded for 78 positions. And a strip may have 150 in the same amount of time. So you could only actually have 78 of the lights on one strip. And I don't think that would actually reach all the way around. So I kind of got, okay, well, you got me there. So I'm going to put these SMDs in over the holes. And they're not sitting flush, but I don't need them to, because this effect it doesn't have to be an intense effect, and he never intended it to be overpowering. But he wanted to demonstrate that this setup would work. Now, could you cut out all of this and get one continuous path? You absolutely could. However, I'm not. And there are aspects of this build, curiously enough, that I may end up regretting what I'm doing. But I feel like this is what was sent to me, and this is what I'm going to attempt to build. Now, I don't know why I think that way, but I do. Okay, so I'm going to start attaching these addressable SMDs with some hot glue, and I'm going to go all the way around, and then I'm going to start daisy chaining them together. And I will not be doing any more of the daisy. I won't be doing any more in this video. I will be memorializing, hopefully showing you the fruits of my labor in the next video. Because I think we're going to call this one now. This is an awful lot of information, but it's handy for you to see what I'm doing and where I'm going. Oh, the only other thing I do want to say before we close out here, is that after talking to Daniel, this pylon turns out was rushed out. Okay, and it turns out that there is supposed to be a red and green nav light here, right here, right in the center of these scallops. So it means I've got to gouge out a line here, and I've got to gouge out a line there to get those lights in there. And I understand that in the second send out of this, that was already done for you, not done for me. So I'm going to have to figure out a clean, nice way to do that, like route that out without cracking this or destroying it. But there you go. That's what's supposed to be on that. And the only other thing I will say, there's a couple of other things, is all those holes that I showed you in these pylons. Let me bring one of those over. Let's see here. Yeah, all these holes that I showed you, that I thought that these holes were for wiring. They are not. They are just simply an artifact left over from the 6-foot model, and they ended up in this scan. So they have nothing to do with running wires to this. But we're going to have to drill a new hole to get our wiring out of our nacelle and into our pylon. So that's one thing that has to happen. The other thing that has to happen is he's recommending 3 mil steel screws with epoxy resin. So he wants us to put screws in here, not pins. Now, 3 mil screws will just about get into the thickness of the pylon, but it could crack the pylon. I don't know. So I'm going to have to try to at least get a starter hole going with a drill press, and hope I don't split these. But these holes they're an artifact. Hey ho. Okay. So there you go. That is it for this update. Thanks to each and every one of you for all of your awesome comments and for following this epic build. This is going to go out this week. This is August, and it is Thursday today. Tomorrow is Friday. It'll probably hit Friday or Saturday, don't know. But that will be around the 10th of August. And then I will have an additional week. So there'll be a third update after this one. And that third update will get us all the way to the 20th. And that will be the week that hopefully my good friend Lou Del Mesa will be joining me here at Spruverse, and we'll do a week of masking windows. Wait till he finds out what I tell him. No, but we'll be masking windows and getting on with design, and we'll also be talking about the base, because I now realize that the metal plate that comes with this base is not going to cut it. I'm going to have to find somebody locally who can help actually weld me a base. That's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll find that person who's going to weld a pipe to my plate that will connect to my base somehow, either threaded or something. I don't know how we're going to, but I'm going to have to find someone to do that, because that's going to need to be done. And I will also have an update on the touch the touch buttons, because Daniel talked me through how the Alcar works. Now I get it. Now it makes perfect sense, and it will work. So I'm pretty excited about that. So lots to cover in the next update, if you please are willing to stay with me. But as always, guys, if you want to get a hold of me, I'm spruverse@gmail.com. You can follow my daily posts on Instagram, my In the Weeds, just little moments of what I'm working on. And I do appreciate those comments. They're works in progress, so be kind when you're commenting. I really, if it's a beauty shot, you'll figure it out. But otherwise, they're works in progress. So there you go. Hey, as always, I wish all of you, please be safe, be well, build something, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Be well.